It's 3 and Out on this Tuesday, on this sunny Tuesday afternoon. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. So much to get to here on the show. No Sean Moreno will join us. Rich Styles will join us. We'll talk some golf with him a week out from the U.S. Open, as well as John Rahm this past week forced to withdraw from the Memorial after testing positive for COVID in a tournament he was winning. So we'll get to that coming up in just a little bit as well. Some potentially big news for college football being discussed. We'll get to that as well. But first, fellas, it's a huge night in the city of brotherly love, and that's because the ATL is invading. You've got the Hawks 76ers tonight, Braves and Phillies starting a series there in Philadelphia. Let's start there. Game 2. Heard this earlier today. Stephen A. Smith saying, look, Hawks win game 2. They will be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Is it that simple for Atlanta tonight if you can take the first 2 in Philly going back to Atlanta?
Well, I think the pressure is clearly on Philadelphia. I mean, when you think about what happened in game 1, and I know the 76ers rallied late, but for the vast majority of that game, not only did Atlanta have a lead, they had a significant lead. And yeah, going down 0-2, especially when you're the home favorite, would be relatively unparalleled in terms of modern history. So I think all the pressure is on the 76ers. If you're Atlanta, you hate to say it's like a free game, but if you win, I mean, that is a just stunning set of circumstances. And if you lose, I think you still feel good going back, right? To go back to Atlanta, to have stolen home court, to be at 1-1. So Ben, I think the pressure is on Philadelphia. I expect Atlanta to play just kind of natural basketball, but you do wonder, is there a sense of desperation already for Philadelphia, and will Atlanta be able to match that intensity?
I mean, I don't think that kind of stuff matters at this point. I mean, I think so. I think too often at times, BJ, we keep on doing this with Atlanta, right? We act as if, Atlanta's in the second round. And I understand Atlanta doesn't have the same star power that Philly does, but maybe Atlanta doesn't have the storyline that Philly does. When you talk about an MVP candidate, in Joel Embiid, you talk about a guy who has an incredible upside of Ben Simmons, even though, he's still a guy that has, things about his game he needs to work on. But I saw Trae Young holding the ball at the end of the first game saying, just calm down. We got this, because the narrative, they used to this, right? They've seen this before. We did this at the Garden, in the first round. So now we get Embiid and company. I just think that the pressure is never going to be on the Hawks, because no matter what the Hawks do, it's less about what the Hawks do and what the other team just wasn't able to do. Like, they wasn't able to get into their rhythm. What would Philly know about a rhythm? What would Philly know about being in this situation? What would Philly know about, understanding how to overcome pressure to go, to make it to the conference final? I just think that, when you look at this Hawks team, we need to start giving them credit. Stephen A. Smith was on the bandwagon with the Knicks, and he's a Knicks fan, and they got blown out, and that was supposed to be a sweep. That shouldn't have even went 5 games. We keep on acting as if chemistry doesn't matter in basketball. Rhythm doesn't matter in basketball. Being, on the same page doesn't matter. When I watch Atlanta, they look like a team that likes playing with each other, that has a rhythm, that's buying into what Nate McMillan is saying. When I watch Philly, they trying to play one-on-one basketball and hope that their man is better than your man. And last time I checked, Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid don't score enough to beat the whole squad. So I like Atlanta, again, not because Atlanta's a better team. They the better coach team. They play better team ball. And BJ, if Philly wants to do that up and down game again, they're not going to beat Atlanta doing that. So it's going to come down to the fourth quarter, making some stops. And I know that people are going to talk about what happened in the last closing seconds. What happened was up 1-0, them ATL boys trying to go up 2-0. And we'll see what happens tonight. But the pressure will always be on them 76ers.
Yeah, I said from the beginning, I thought Atlanta was playing with house money here at this point, because they have exceeded expectations. Nate McMillan comes in, not really mid-year, but the season was underway, and this Hawks team has turned it around from a team that was fledgling, underachieving, not really playing any semblance of good team basketball, to one that is a win away from taking the clear-cut lead in a Eastern Conference semifinals series, so much so that people are saying if they win tonight, they're going to the finals and they'll close out the series. And again, I think it's important, if you look at the Hawks, you don't couch it with anything and say, oh, well, the Knicks. No, they beat the Knicks. Oh, what about the 76ers put Joel Embiid out there? Well, Joel Embiid was out there. Joel Embiid plays. I mean, I think that's how we kind of typically do it in sports. It's like, hey, don't come with well, so-and-so wasn't 100%. Did they play? Is it the playoffs? It counts. I mean, they're out there. So the Hawks did it, and it wasn't like Joel Embiid shirked away from the competition. He had a pretty nice game. It was just not good enough to beat the Hawks. So I think the Hawks, to me, come out with nothing to lose, but I think a lot of intensity tonight because you say, well, it doesn't matter if you win game 2 because you're going back up. No, if you win game 2, statistically, BJ, you have got the 76ers in a deep, deep hole in terms of advancing to the next round. Now, can you lose? Absolutely. But I want to say it's like in the 80 percentile. If you go up 2-0 going home in a series, like you're going to win. So this is going to be very, very huge for Atlanta. And I would hope they kind of, for lack of a better term, treat this like a game 7 and go out and try to get it. And if they can, it obviously swings huge in their favor.
Yeah, massive. And I think, basketball is a game of runs, right? You have teams go on a 15-2 run, or I think Atlanta had like a 17-1 run or something crazy like that in game 1. I would expect Philadelphia to come out really aggressive and to really try to set the tone from an intensity standpoint because they need this, right? They need this win tonight. Atlanta wants it, and Atlanta could kind of change the dynamic of the postseason in the Eastern Conference if they win tonight. But I think you're going to see the 76ers really come out, just trying to set a tone and establish an early lead. So I think if you're Atlanta, the first quarter, maybe the first half of the first quarter tonight, going to be really important, really telling.
Yeah, but I think too, BJ, the one thing is we make it all about the other team not named the Hawks, right? We act as if the Hawks could be the more impressive team just because and they could also be the most dangerous team. They're not the most potent, obviously. They reside in Brooklyn, but I just think that Trae Young is like, look, man, okay, we play basketball over here too. And, our process is never, ever going to be celebrated because we're not one of the, we one of the teams in the NBA that's not celebrated like a Philadelphia 7 or New York Knicks or LA Lakers or Boston Celtics and so on and so forth. But if Philadelphia wins tonight, don't mean they're going to win the series. I mean, this is a young Hawks team that's what, a couple of years, dare I say, ahead of schedule. I mean, you go from Lloyd Pierce to Nate McMillan. I know Tom Thibodeau won, Coach of the Year. I think they did it for the whole year and not half of the year, which I think it could have easily won to Nate McMillan. But Kevin and BJ, I just think that this has always been the Atlanta Hawks narrative, right? It ain't got nothing to do with Trae Young and the current crop. It's always been like this. It's always been the other team not named Atlanta. So that's why Atlanta goes out and plays well. And everybody's so shocked when Atlanta wins. I'm like, well, yeah, man. And they're not in a bad East. The best team in basketball is in Brooklyn, in the East. The second best team in basketball is in Milwaukee, in the East. So don't give me that, the East is down. No, LeBron left the East and the East got competitive. And I'm sorry, when Atlanta wins tonight, once again, these narratives change every single day when it comes to the Hawks. Philadelphia going to come out swinging. Joel Embiid said, I'm doing this for a ring. Joel, sit down. What would you know about a ring, young man? You can barely stay healthy, but I'm looking forward to the game tonight. I think all the pressure's on the 76ers, and Trae Young and them young Hawks wouldn't want to no other way.
Yeah, Ben Troop calling his shot there. When the Hawks win tonight.
I'm just saying. I'm putting pressure on them Hawks, but Kevin, how impressive has it been? Trae Young, dare I say, is outperforming Luka Doncic at this point as far as team and maybe even individually, BJ, if you look at, because he got to carry his team every game too.
Yeah, that's very true. And again, I hate to put it all on, hey, here's what a 4-game stretch or 5-game stretch means. This team has got the better end of the trade because it really wasn't until Nate McMillan showed up that Trae Young became a more complete ball player, right? Before it was like, hey, he could score. He might be able to give you out a couple of assists, but he's going to turn the ball over maybe more than you like. And up until Nate McMillan, he probably was going to give you less than average defense. And I think that's probably being kind with how he was playing. I think statistically last year was the worst defender in the NBA. So I think there's something to be said for development. I just don't want to put it all. It's like, oh, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, who's better at this point based on a 5-game playoff stretch? I think time will continue to tell that narrative. But again, Trae Young's having, certainly in Hawks history, hadn't been too many that have played better in the postseason than what he's doing right now. Also in Atlanta, or also in Philly tonight, I think probably, if I'm not mistaken, it's like right down the street from where the 76ers play. You got the Braves and the Phillies tonight, and this is a big one. Why? Because it's National League East. but Braves and Phillies buttressed up against one another in the standings. So you're trying to keep pace with the Mets, but also put a little distance between yourself and the Philadelphia Phillies tonight. And you send Drew Smyly, let's cross our fingers and toes, to the mound tonight.
Well, on paper, it's a tough pitching matchup. Aaron Nola has been really good for the Phillies. His ERA is 3.84. Drew Smyly's ERA is 5.98, and that is well below average for a starting pitcher. And I went and looked, Kevin. He's really struggled with the long ball. He's given up the second most home runs in Major League Baseball. He's given up 14. And of the guys who have given up a considerable amount of home runs, Smyly has the fewest innings pitched. So really needs to try to keep the ball down. I think if you can give up or if you do give up a couple of home runs, make sure they're solo shots, right? I think that's where you get in trouble, is when you're walking guys, and what would normally be a solo home run, which you can deal with, is a 3-run home run, and that changes the entire nature of the game. So I think for Smyly, keep the ball down. Obviously, you have power hitters in that Philly lineup, but keep the ball down. Don't give away free passes. Throw strikes, and I think the Braves will have a chance. But that's the key for Smyly. Keep the ball down tonight.
Yeah, keep the ball down. Keep the ball down in a way. I mean, do you want to give them something to hit? But no, I mean, Kevin, isn't this the norm now with these Braves? Look, you win 2 out of 3. You know, you beat Bauer, you beat Kershaw. Here we go. I mean, and here we forget about how well, how deep the pitching staffs in the NL East is. But you knew this. I mean, I think even though Drew Smyly had nothing to do with those wins against the Dodgers, got to go out there and prove it. Game in and game out. I just think that I do agree, BJ. They got to keep pace with the Mets. Don't let them get too far ahead of them. But another game, another test. Got to go out there and make it happen, because Drew Smyly, it's always about the starter, right? No, it's about the bullpen. Drew Smyly's not playing the whole game. Can that bullpen keep that momentum from that Dodgers series?
Well, I do think it's important to. I think with ever increasing start, Drew Smyly's pitching for his spot in the rotation, because you have plenty of guys that have major league experience in the minors that certainly can't do much worse than a 6 ERA. I think Bryce Wilson could certainly give you sub 6. I think Kyle Wright could probably give you sub 6. And if that's the case, why not go with those guys? So I think if you're Drew Smyly, you're pitching to keep your spot in that rotation. But the center of the Atlanta sports world tonight, they're in Philadelphia with Braves, Phillies, Hawks, and 76ers game number 2. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show, but so much to get to if you're a college football fan. We talked about it a lot on this show, but could it be inching closer to a reality? We'll tell you what we mean when we come back. It's 3 and Out on this Tuesday afternoon. Great to be here with you on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. College football always in the news. As we've talked a number of times, we go to SEC Media Days. I've asked Bill Hancock about the college football playoffs, the executive director of the college football playoff. Hey, is there going to be expansion? Is there going to be expansion? He always like, nope, we're good. Well, now apparently, I think next week, there's going to be a subcommittee presentation to the college football playoff committee about the various potential models of college football playoff expansion. And according to Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports, the model that is the early favorite is the 12-team model. That could be the newest iteration of the college football playoff. Now, again, the subcommittee is going to make its presentation. The college football playoff committee has to go in and approve any type of expansion. And then, of course, you got to get TV networks involved and all that. So this will not happen in 2021, needless to say. But are you surprised, BJ, offhand, that at least behind closed doors, if you were going to go with an expansion model, it's the 12 and not the 18 model that seemingly a lot of people are down with?
Yeah, a little bit. I think we all knew or know that the inevitability here was there. The college football playoff with 4 teams was an introduction, and it was only a matter of time before the field was going to expand. Now, I don't know if you were kind of hinting at it there, Kevin, but I for one thought that 8 teams was going to be kind of the next step in this process. But there is some logic to 12 teams, and obviously it would be exciting. Just viscerally, I think there are some pros and cons that stand out right away. I think first and foremost for me, increased opportunities for G5 schools. We have not yet seen the Central Floridas, the Coastal Carolinas, the Cincinnati's, the Memphises, Boise State, whoever get an opportunity. And I think that's important if those schools are in that top tier, and a couple have been. And I would assume, and who knows, but if you expand it, you would have an automatic qualifier for the top G5 school and opportunities, at least in theory, for at-large bids. And I think that would be a good thing for college football. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, just to speak to that, the kind of theory behind the 12 teams, in case you're wondering, obviously the top 4 teams would get a bye. So I assume you're still coming out with playoff rankings, et cetera, each and every week. The top 4 teams get a bye. If you're watching us online on Facebook, Twitter, or our YouTube channel, you can see kind of what the top 12 teams from last year would have looked like in a playoff format. But top 4 teams get a bye. Auto bids from the Power 5 champions. So your Power 5 schools will get an auto bid. I'm assuming that opens things up if one of those top 4 are the conference champion, and the highest ranked G5 gets an auto bid as well. So under that situation last year, Cincinnati would have gotten an auto bid, and then there would be 6 at large. And again, if you're watching on our Facebook, our Twitter page, or our YouTube channel, you can see where 4 teams would get a bye into kind of what we now know as the 4-team playoff, or the quarterfinals, if you will, in those traditional kind of orange sugar Peach Bowl kind of format there. And the other teams, the other 8, would have to play at a home site to get to that point.
If we going from 4 to 12, I think that's a step in the right direction, because that I don't think it's going to stay at 12. But BJ, when you look at how many teams got like this right here is awarding every year in college football, one conference might stand out more than the next. So obviously you see Florida, you see Texas A&M, you see Georgia, you see Alabama. So and then you got the 4 automatic qualifiers in Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Clemson. You talk about Cincinnati, you talk about Coastal Carolina. That's a true represent. That's a true. Now, when you look at all the conference championship winners are not going to get in. But I think that by going from 4 to 12. No, I'm sorry. Not all the conference championships will get automatic bids. I'm sorry.
The Power 5 will.
So
the conference champions for the Power 5 will get an automatic bid.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but not all the conferences. But not all the conferences. Right.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
But Kevin, this goes back to what you were saying. It's like this comes down. What's really affecting this is the fact that the Pac-12 has not made. Forget making the college football playoff. They haven't got a part of that check. And they're not going to keep dealing with that when you got the Oregons that's good enough to get in there. You got the USC. They seem to be playing better. But from 4 to 12, BJ, if that's not a step in the right direction, nothing is, because I don't think it's going to stop at 12. Give a Coastal Carolina a lot of credit because the Sun Belt is one of the hardest conferences to come out of. You still got App, still got Louisiana. Then you talking about a Cincinnati team was waving that red flag like the Boise States of the world, back in the day. So I do think it's never ever gonna favor the top the bottom tier teams. But at the same time, from 4 to 12, I think it's a step in the right direction. We'll see if it gets in because Kevin. We see Mr. Hancock. For Kevin barely sits down. The seat is barely warm. So we're going to 6. He's like, no. If we go he said, maybe that's why he said no. Because he's like, we're not going to 6, we're going to go to 12. So maybe that's why he's telling you no.
Given all the conversations we've had about this in the past, I am just amazed that is, again, amongst the people they've talked to, the direction a lot would want to go in. And again, the committee has to approve all this. And it's not like the subcommittee's going in there and saying, this is the 12-game scenario. No, they're making a presentation on 8 and 12 and probably a 16 and all that. I'm just amazed at, BJ, how much the resistance there was to whenever we would have discussions about going from 4 to 8. People were like, come on, you just got, and you're going to go, 3 times that to 12. That seems like a heck of a leap from. Well, I'm saying, but that's a heck of a leap from 4 to 12 when you were so hesitant to even go to 8 at some point when we had these discussions. So obviously this is, without saying, about one thing and one thing only. It ain't about Coastal Carolina getting in there. It's about the green and the cheddar. So, I think that's what they see is, look, how do we, because one thing I have said is the playoffs and the BCS before that have made a lot of the other bowl games irrelevant. They're fun, they're nice, but at the end of the day, they don't really mean a whole lot. Now, all of a sudden, you've still incorporated bowl games in this, and you've made a whole lot more, quote, postseason games that are worth a little bit more than a trip and a $500-600 not per diem. What do you call these gift bags that they get at the bowl game? So I think you found a way to spice it up a little bit more and have more teams involved, which seems to be, again, the okay philosophy for every other sports league on the planet, except college football, where, heaven forbid, you were to go to this many, it deems the regular season irrelevant, which is the biggest bunch of nonsense I've ever heard in my life.
Well, I do think all of us want expansion. I think most of college football fans want expansion. I do think there would be pros and cons. And, I mentioned, I think the biggest pro, at least first glance, would be the potential for more inclusion, including a direct bid for G5 schools. I think, Kevin, you've talked about this with baseball when they expanded their playoff, but also just an expanded field of interest. If you get late in the season and there are only 5-6 fan bases who have a chance at the playoff, well, that's a very limited group of people who are directly kind of tied into what's happening with the playoff. If you have 12 potential slots, you could have 20, 25 fan bases who at least possibly have a chance at their team getting to the playoff later in the year. I think the idea of Power 5 conference champions getting in guaranteed is a pro and a con potentially. Because, yes, if you win a Power 5 conference, you would think more years than not you should be in. But also understand that there will be scenarios, and it could happen with the SEC, it could happen with the ACC, but kind of the most logical or easy example to make right now would be the Pac-12, where maybe a team goes 9-3 or 10-2 out of the SEC, but somehow doesn't get in. But a conference champion goes 7-5 in the Pac-12. They're not in the top 15. They're not in the top 20. Maybe they're number 23 in the country, but they get a spot into the playoff. I think that. Well, and Kevin, I know you're nodding your head, but that's
I'm
something
okay with that.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
But I'm saying that's something people need to be prepared for. Is don't always assume that you win your conference. You're going to be a top 10 team. I went to the first ever ACC championship game, and Florida State won the ACC with 5 losses, and I don't think they were ranked. So just be prepared for there to be outlier years where a team wins a Power 5 conference but isn't considered an elite team. And then
Well, BJ, were you or Ben, were you outraged that the NFC East got a playoff bid last year?
No, but the NFC, and again, I'm not disagreeing with expansion, but what I'm saying is the NFC East has, and the NFL has at least comparable equitability in scheduling. So I think records are more viably compared. Alabama's schedule, for example, is dramatically different than Clemson's, is dramatically different than Washington's. And I think that's where it gets kind of hard to compare and contrast, or Coastal Carolinas, for example. I also think you would have to keep in mind, and it's been done at the FCS level and the D2 level, you would have potentially longer seasons where you could be playing an NFL type season in terms of the length of games. And then I do think about this, Kevin, for as much as people say, oh man, I'm tired of seeing Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State and Notre Dame in the playoff and Oklahoma. Well, if you expand the field, do you think those teams are not going to get in? I mean, if you create basically a threshold where if you go 9-3 or 10-2 from a power conference, you're getting in, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia are going to be in every year. Every single year, even in their down years. And I'm not saying those are bad things. I'm just saying there are pros and cons. I'm in favor of expansion, but I think there would be pros and cons to all of this.
This right here is more of a true barometer of college football, because people are always saying, well, what would happen if they was an SEC? They would get beat by Alabama like they beat up on everybody else in the SEC. Alabama beats up on everybody in the SEC. Vanderbilt benefits from getting the hell beat out of them, not by Alabama in the SEC, but it's like when they get the TV money. This right here, think about this. If this was last year, that mean that if Coastal Carolina recruited, they saying, look, we in the same bracket as the Clemsons, as the Alabamas, because this is the only, like Kevin said, this is the only one that matters. Right here, this doesn't matter that you make it a bowl game mean either you got a bowl tie-in or you won 6 games. That's it. That's it. So I think that this right here is more of a true barometer of college football. But the thing about it is this too, BJ and Kevin, you guys know this. It's going to be very, very difficult to beat Alabama and Clemson on a neutral field. You don't think Ohio State can be beat? You don't think Notre Dame can be beat? So all I'm saying is, what's scary is a Coastal Carolina, they beat Texas A&M. Now they playing Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame. And the thing is now, could you imagine? Cincinnati and Georgia play each other. Georgia beats Cincinnati. Cincinnati got to play Alabama. Coastal Carolina found a way to play Alabama in the Final Four. They're gonna get beat, but just look at that, Alabama against Coastal Carolina. So what is everybody doing? Tapping it. So I do think it's a better system, only because what scares college football is they want the talent. The most talented team to win. This is just like the NCAA tournament. You got Cinderella teams, but it's going to end up being a blue blood at the end. At least you hope. I don't see that stopping in this, but I just think this is a better barometer for college football, because you got all spectrum of college football, not just the most talented teams, the most top recruited teams in the country.
I mean, again, I think if you want to try to even the landscape even further, is have some of these teams get in there. Again, I think while you can't make it 100% direct correlation, BJ, I mean, let's be real. Best recruiting conference in America is the SEC. They've had 2 teams in the playoffs a couple of times. You've had Clemson there. They recruit really well. Notre Dame's been in there. Pac-12 has been largely left out, and I think you see them suffer for it. I think the Big 12 outside of Oklahoma has largely not been in the playoffs. How is their conference outside of Oklahoma? Largely, it's been a tough recruiting conference because you have Oklahoma. Even Texas is going to. I think getting some more of these teams in there, like the Coastal Carolinas, even like a Texas A&M, Iowa State, to me, that helps spread the talent out, because kids look up and say, oh, it's the playoffs. Hey, I remember Iowa State was in there. I remember Texas A&M got in there. Indiana made it. I think that helps recruiting in those schools and gives you a better conference. If you're the Big 12, Big 10, what have you, even the SEC, if you get some teams like a South Carolina or somebody who's able to have a great season and get themselves in there, to me, that only makes your conferences better and maybe pushes you a little closer to knocking off the Clemsons and the Bamas from their pedestals. So to me, expanded playoffs helps, because recruits will say, look, I don't have to go to Alabama and Clemson. I can go to Iowa State, Indiana, whoever, and we can still get in the playoffs and we can still get our shot to go out there and play for it all. So maybe that's a good consequence where it evens out some of the talent. I don't want to say even out, but maybe 70-30, 65-35 spreads the talent out a little bit across college football, and you get even better kind of college football as a result. We'll talk more about this as we go along here on this Tuesday. Much more to get to, including OTAs, Arthur Smith sounding off on Julio Jones. You don't want to miss that. And some early comments out of Jags camp as well. It's 3 and Out. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. We're streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com. Great to be here with you on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop. Glad you're making us a part of your day. So much to get to with mini camps going on around the National Football League. You got some quotes from Jacksonville and Atlanta going on. Arthur Smith talking about what his goals for minicamp, kind of broke out the coach speak saying, hey, we're trying to get our schemes in, and then said this when asked about how the offense would change without Julio Jones. Quote, I don't worry about the players I never coached.
Listen, Coach Smith, number one, I respect it, right? I mean, BJ, he's kind of doing what you want from the players, right? Giving us that honest, and he's never been a head coach. So when people talk about coach speak, well, he used to be an offensive coordinator. He wasn't doing that national media to the point where it didn't matter what he said, it'd go to Mike Vrabel. Well, now he's saying, look, I don't worry about the players I ain't coach. And he kind of give you that stare. Arthur Smith got that blank stare on his face. I respect it because I think that we always got to understand that there's so many narratives. And can coaches really win in press conferences? They really can't. I mean, Arthur Smith definitely didn't go to the school of Bill Belichick and interview. I say a whole bunch of nothing. But if I'm a player for the Atlanta Falcons, we got to start putting number 11 in the rear view. You're gonna be missed, but he ain't helped Arthur Smith do anything. Like, look, I ain't never coach him. I know who Julio is, but I'm gonna worry about Ridley. I'm gonna worry about Pitts. I'm gonna worry about Hayden Hurst. I'm gonna worry about Gage. I'm gonna worry about Deion Jones and those type guys because you're gonna take on the persona of your head coach every single time. And Arthur Smith is kind of setting the tone for Atlanta media, saying, look, don't be asking me about who. That's really what he's saying. Please don't get to ask me about Julio every single day. He's gone. We know he's an Atlanta great. I mean, one of the greatest of the Falcons, but he's going to be in the Falcons Ring of Honor. But I only want to treat it just like OTAs. Ask him about the players who here, not the players who not here.
Yeah, I understand it, but you have to know you're going to get that question when he's one of the greatest players in the history of the organization, a Hall of Famer, one of the great players in the history of the league, and the offense is going to be different. I mean, the offense is going to be different without Julio Jones, and I know you've had stretches in recent years where he hasn't been there, but you're talking about an all-pro talent who's not going to be on the field. And is his production replaced by Calvin Ridley? Ridley had a fantastic year a year ago, finished with the same number of yards, I think 5th in the NFL as Devontae Adams, finished with 1,374 yards. That's number one receiver production. Is that the expectation moving forward? Is some of that shared with Kyle Pitts? From a statistical standpoint, what is the expectation for Kyle Pitts? Is it 700-800 yards? Is it potentially more than that? So I think it goes without saying that Coach didn't coach Julio Jones, and he probably doesn't have a great feel for the nuance of kind of Julio's production week to week, given that he didn't coach them. But it is going to be different. There's no doubt about it.
No, he knows his production. I mean, you have to live on the rock to not know what Julio Jones has done. But BJ, that's the thing. Let me just say this: you don't replace Julio. It's not about the catches and the yards and the touchdowns. If number 11 is on the field, he draws a crowd. I mean, not only are we watching him, the entire defense is shifting to his side. When you ask what is Kyle Pitts, first downs, touchdowns, move the chains. That's what you want Kyle Pitts to do. I mean, we had Orlando on. He was talking about the guy looks real good. They're getting him ready. They're telling him right now, Julio is gone, and we're going to have to get people to forget about him. You know who's going to get us to do that? You. He's like, what? He said, but I asked Julio for an autograph. You did? Yeah. Well, don't tell anybody else that. Because think about this. When they asked Kyle Pitts, who's your favorite tight end of all time? He went, Tony Gonzalez. That boy, he's listening. I get it. Tony Gonzalez, former Atlanta Falcon great. But no, BJ, you don't replace Julio Jones. You just go out there. Ridley is primed and ready. Gage is primed and ready. Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts is going to be a nice little tandem. And you just go out there and make it happen because the commentator's going to do that. If that would have been Julio, he would have broke that. I mean, this man had 300 yards receiving against Luke Kuechly and the Carolina Panthers. You're not replacing that. I'm just saying. So you got to start putting Julio in the rear view. I don't like it. Well, I do like it because he went to the Titans, but I don't like it that he left the Falcons. But BJ, I'm sorry, but people got tired of hearing about Trevor Lawrence and Tim Tebow. So now that boy is up there.
I actually don't have a problem with Arthur Smith saying that about. I mean, again, people were like, "How could you say that about Julio?" I mean, did Julio, was he even there for one practice with Arthur Smith? No. So it's like, hey, how does your offense change with Julio? Well, I never had Julio, so it doesn't change at all, right? I mean, ever since you've been there, it's been, well, it looks like either Julio Jones or Matt Ryan is going to be gone. Well, until you know one of those, you probably don't start going deep into schemes about how to get them the ball if you think you're going to have a new quarterback who may not have the skills of Matt Ryan or Julio Jones is going to be gone. So I don't have a problem with him saying that. Hey, I'm the head coach. Hey, can't worry about who's not here. Never had him really, and we move forward. Other stuff from Jags camp, obviously, Trevor Lawrence is off limits. Defensive end Roy Robertson Harris said, look, hey, I can't touch him or I'd be on the Greyhound bus back to Texas. So, yeah, you get your number one quarterback who's just had surgery. Look, no, don't touch him. Don't breathe at him. Don't even look at him. Just let him do his thing out there. And of note, because Trevor Lawrence coming in, going to try to get the offense going. Nate Burleson on Good Morning Football today, BJ and Ben, saying he thinks that Laviska Shenault, one of his top 5 breakout receivers for 2021 in the National Football League.
I'm a big fan. You're talking about a guy that's 6'1", Ben, about 230, really athletic, really explosive, versatile. If you watch the Jags last year, and I know that was tough, later in the season, they lined him up at the running back position. They'll use him on kind of sweeps from the slot. So a really dynamic playmaker. I agree with Nate Burleson. I think he's poised for a huge year.
Yeah, I mean, Laviska, kind of built kind of like A.J. Brown for the Titans. BJ, them bully type receivers can play him outside, can play him inside. I mean, if they can start gelling here really, really early, I mean, Shenault, DJ Chark, them guys gonna be hard to beat. I mean, I know that everybody keep talking about Travis Etienne's gonna play running back. He's not gonna play receiver. But when you got defensive players talking about hitting quarterbacks, when the last time you got to hit a quarterback on your team? That he's talking about like this is the NFL. This is a college thing. You don't get to hit them. They got on different colored jerseys for a reason. If I would have hit Trevor Lawrence, did you hit? I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, did you hit Ellinger and all that? No. Did you hit Sam? No. Like you don't get to hit them. That just doesn't happen. Greyhound, but boy, they gonna put you on a Greyhound. Or they gonna tell you to get the hell out.
Not even the first class ticket on a play. No, but look, I think from Laviska Shenault, if he is one of the 5 breakout receivers in the NFL, that means Trevor Lawrence is probably living up to expectations. It would be my guess.
You hope so. And the thing is, I mean, I give Urban Meyer a lot of credit now. I mean, he's giving him a running back he's used to. DJ Chark is, I mean, BJ, he's had, I think, already a Pro Bowl caliber season if he hasn't been a Pro Bowl. Laviska Shenault is built for the AFC South. When you look at what they want to do with receivers, you're not going to have 1,600-yard receivers in the AFC South. They still want to do that, run the football first, open it up for the pass. But BJ, I want to say his name wrong. The receiver y'all just got from Detroit. We ain't even been talking about him.
Marvin Jones.
Marvin Jones. So he's route running. I mean, I think he's the only receiver in the last 3 years to have double-digit touchdowns like last 3 or 4 years. So, look, they got a nice little offense going on. And you look at the fact that what Tennessee is looking to do, you're going to have to be able to match them production-wise, and you still got to deal with that Indy defense. But, yeah, I think Laviska, I mean, I remember when he got drafted, big-time receiver. They put you at running back. That means you got big-time skills.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. No Sean Marino going to join us coming up in about 15 minutes here on 3 and Out. Looking forward to talking with the former NFL and Georgia running back here on 3 and Out. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Good to have you here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. On this Tuesday afternoon, Kevin, BJ, and Ben will hear from No Sean Moreno coming up top of next hour. Also, Rich Styles, Back Nine Boys Golf Show. We'll talk some golf with him as we are a week out from the U.S. Open. So looking forward to chatting with No Sean, obviously great running back there at Georgia, and a lot of insight into what it's like to play running back there for the Dogs.
Oh, man, one of the great running backs been in SEC history, one of the great Georgia Bulldogs. And think about a couple of highlights for him. I go back to, 07 as a redshirt freshman against the Gators, goes for 188 yards and 3 touchdowns against Florida in Jacksonville. And then his sophomore year, Ben, I know you had an incredible highlight at Florida, a couple that a lot of people remember. Everybody, you talk about No Sean Moreno. Remember when he jumped over that guy in the open field? That was against Central Michigan in 2008. So that's one of the iconic plays when you think about individual highlights, really in college football history.
No Sean Moreno, BJ, was one of those ones, right? You know what I mean? That's a term you hear a lot when you talk about some of the best college football players. I mean, I don't know if he grew up a Georgia fan because I think he's from like the Philadelphia area. I think he's from like up north. To come down to the SEC and still have the career he had. And BJ, you throwing numbers at me talking about 185 yards and 3. That's certain guys. I mean, that's good enough to be your highlight reel for. That's just a game for him. And obviously he's most known for when he was with the Denver Broncos. I don't know how he got that much water to come out of his one eye. Y'all ain't never seen him when he was crying. He had y'all ain't never seen him when No Sean Moreno was crying. He had all this water come. It's obviously water comes like y'all when you're crying.
The largest tears I've ever seen in my life.
You guys ain't never seen it. During the break, I want you guys to see this. It looks like I don't know, like somebody squeezed like like something, I don't know, like a rag and it's coming. I ain't never seen nothing like it. If I'm gonna ask him, hey man, obviously you ain't got crocodile tears. I'm just saying. But Kevin, you ain't never seen that with No Sean Moreno with his tears.
Tears are fake tears.
Huh?
Are you sure he didn't just like pour water on his face? What is that?
That's amazing when you look at it. So yeah, No Sean.
You just showed me a picture of it. It is very. That doesn't look real. That looks like it was made up. CGI.
Well, it happened on the sideline in real time. So I mean, I'm just saying. No Sean said that.
We'll get the real story. So, Christian said it was sweat. That's a lot of sweat either way. I think it's all fake. That's all I'm saying. We'll hear from No Sean Moreno when we come back. Rich Styles will join us in hour number 2 as well. We're counting down towards Braves and Phillies from Philadelphia coming up a little bit later this evening. So much more to get to. Don't go anywhere. If you missed any portion of the show, ESPNCoastal.com. Go to our YouTube page, Apple Podcasts, Spotify as well. Hit us up on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you at Pigskin Radio. At Pigskin Radio, we are streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, and also live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We're coming right back. No Sean Moreno, Georgia, legendary running back. We'll step in here on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hour 2 coming up next. Good to have you here on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. A lot to get to here in hour number 2. Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, will join us coming up in just a little bit. And we will talk some golf with him as we are a week out from the U.S. Open, as well as some interesting things happening last week at the Memorial. Jon Rahm winning after 3 rounds, had to withdraw due to a positive COVID test. So we'll talk to Rich about that. We are efforting Knowshon Moreno, BJ, and Ben, but in the interim, if you missed it, as early as next week, we could have a subcommittee of the college football playoff committee, a subcommittee of that, bring a proposal next week on playoff expansion options. And according to Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports, the most popular one with some tractions to it is the 12-team playoff in college football that could be brought to committee next week to look at as part of various different proposals. But the 12-team apparently where 4 teams get a bye, all the Power 5 champs get an auto bid, a top G5 school gets an auto bid, and that leaves you with 6 at-large schools to get into the college football playoff under that 12-team scenario. Again, not even a proposal at this point, just the one that seems to have the most support potentially behind it.
Yeah, and I think the playoff ever since it was introduced was going to expand, right? And Kevin, I can confirm your questions. Every year at Media Days, you've asked Bill Hancock about expansion, and it's always been, well, we're focused on the here and now. But I think in the back of everybody's mind, there was always the understanding, because you've said this time and time again, and it's very poignant. Look, there are 4 slots in the playoff. There are 5 Power 5 conferences, not even including, the group of 5. Notre Dame obviously is a unique kind of entity. Is there an independent? So you knew this thing was going to expand. I do think that every potential option for expansion is going to have positives and is going to have negatives, at least potentially. Now, I am in favor of expansion. I think we all are. I want to go back to something you said, Kevin, earlier, and Ben, get your thoughts on it too, about does expansion potentially lessen the immediacy of some of the regular season games? And what I mean by that is I largely agree with you, Kevin, that I think that's kind of an overblown sentiment in that games will still very much matter. I do think if you go from 4 to 12, I mean, could you see a scenario where just for example, maybe in the past you had a 1-loss or an undefeated Alabama playing a 1-loss or an undefeated Auburn in the Iron Bowl, and kind of the drama of the winner goes to the SEC championship game and probably the playoff adds to it. Whereas if you have 12 teams instead of 4, maybe the winner and the loser is pretty much guaranteed to be in the playoff. And that's how it should be under this format. But do you think that would potentially, situations like that, take away from some of the drama at all?
No, it's not going to take away. It's going to make more drama. But I mean, because we getting too caught up in the fact of who's going to win these conferences. What if you are Texas A&M? Like, you lost only to Alabama, which means you're not going to represent the West, and you that third team out. I think that's going to make the games more compelling, because now, BJ, ain't no such thing as, oh well, it's always going to come down to who you lose to and when you lose to them. But that's going to make the games even better. Now, I do think it's still going to. The top teams are going to be the top teams, no matter what. If it doesn't benefit the top teams, they're not doing it. So let's just look past Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma for a second. All right, you still got 8. You got 8 slots. I just think that for me, number one, now Kevin, you don't have to worry about having the Pac-12 commissioner who doesn't have a vote, in the subcommittee, because they're going to get in, but it's going to just be the winner. This is going to come to who is the conference winner and who had the best conference. Because whoever had the best conference is going to put more teams in. I like this strategy. I like the fact that all schools are, have a shot, because now it's not these, you got 8 teams that got a shot to get in. It's, BJ, now you're going to pay more attention to the Sun Belt, because you have to. When you look at those type of teams, you're going to pay more attention, to the Conference USAs of the world, because they got the UCFs of the world. So now that's the only way they're going to get in. So I do think it's a step in the right direction. I just think that too, Kevin, Alabama just sit back and kick their feet up, because Alabama like, look, we don't got to win the SEC. They're going to put us in either way. And that's when it gets good, when Alabama isn't the SEC winner and they don't play the SEC championship game and they got to actually play in. They got to play their way to the national championship. That's when it gets compelling.
Well, I mean, look, I just push back against because you expand the playoffs, it means every game doesn't matter. I mean, I've just never bought that nonsense. I mean, if anything, it makes more games matter. Under that scenario, BJ, you say, oh, who was it? Ben said Texas A&M plays Alabama. Texas A&M loses. Okay, they can't win the SEC, but it just made every game on the rest of their schedule very important. Whereas under this scenario, once you lose to Alabama and you're not going to the SEC championship game, okay, you're playing for the Peach Bowl or something like that. I just think it's nonsense to say that every game does not matter because you don't. And again, I've said this. That's why I've been a big proponent of conference champions getting in. And I know you say the pushback is, well, what happens if a 7-6 team or 7-5 team gets in? I'm okay with that because of this. You want games to matter? Every game mattered to that team because they had to scrap and call to get there. How many conferences have we seen where the conference champion wasn't decided with 2 weeks or a week to go in the season? It's a lot. And now that we have conference championship games that's still out there, how many times have we seen divisions where who's going to the conference championship game wasn't decided until the week before Thanksgiving? You mean to tell me every game doesn't matter there? I think when you have teams competing for a conference champion, and at the end of the day, you know the conference champion has the auto bid, then my number one goal, to me, this is me talking, if I'm a college president, my number one goal under a 12-team scenario, if I'm, let's say I'm running Virginia Tech, BJ Bennett, my number one goal, give me 4 big out-of-conference games where we can challenge ourselves, or maybe 3, and give me one where I can, work on some stuff. Give me 3 good out-of-conference games, and if I go win the ACC, I am in. And I have prepared myself with a schedule to go out there and get it done. To me, this would lead to more intriguing non-conference matchups, not less, trying to weasel our way into 12-0, 11-1, where we could sit there and say, man, I play in a weak conference. If I go get Eastern Montana and Northern Idaho and New Mexico State and, maybe San Jose State, I can go undefeated in my I'm going to be 12, and even if I slip up, I'll be 11-1, baby. I'm in. No, go play people, prepare yourself for the conference slate, and which would prepare you for a championship game. To me, it makes a lot of games to a lot of teams very important, where now, let's face it, if your team is 0-2 on September 10th, you're not talking about playoffs. You're not talking about any of that. You're talking about what kind of mediocre bowl game are we going to try to go to, and hopefully it's at least a cool place that our fans want to visit, and they give out PlayStations at the end. I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
No, I think you make a good look. Listen, I think the idea of a conference champion auto bid amongst the Power 5 makes sense. All I'm saying is I want people to understand the totality of what that could mean. Is I think all of us, right? All of us in our minds, when we think about a conference champion, we think about a team that's, 11-1 and was in the top 5 all year. I just want people to be prepared. And I'm not saying I disagree with it. I think what you're saying makes sense for the possibility. I've been to multiple conference championship games where the team that has won has either been unranked or has been kind of 20, 23, 24, somewhere in that range. Hold on a second.
Isn't that what you want from sports, right? Or do we always want the higher ranked team to win and we can just pack it in and go home? I mean,
no, it's not that. I think you could see a scenario potentially where you have, let's say, and obviously you could run into this now, but as there's more of an expanded field, you could have a scenario where somebody goes 10-2, they lose in their conference championship game. They have a more Hold on.
That sounds like every game matters. Wait, right. It still matters. You got to win.
Hold on. They have a more impressive resume. And I think this was even pointed out in kind of the model description. But let's say they're considered the first team out of the at-large potential teams, and they don't get in with a better resume, where theoretically, and I'm not saying it has to be the Pac-12. I don't want to pick on the Pac-12. Like I said, I was at the first ever ACC championship game before Clemson was elite, and Florida State was 7-5. And we can double check this if Cody's in there. I think it was 2005. I believe Florida State had played Florida the week before and had lost by like 28. So you have a Florida State team that got blown out by their arch rival, won the conference championship game against a heavily favored Virginia Tech team, and ended up being the conference champion at 7-5. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying we've been so conditioned to picking the 4 best teams. I want people to be prepared for that.
No, we've been conditioned to pick the 4 teams out of a group of 8. Like, and I think what happens in these scenarios is what Kevin said, BJ. I mean, this is going to switch up, every other year. Last year was Iowa State. This year it could be Penn State, Michigan, different teams, right? What I like the fact is this: just because you win your conference don't mean you're the best team in the conference. That just means you won. And I'm sitting here with imposters and stuff next to me right now. But I just think that at the end of the day, I like the fact that if Coastal Carolina did what they did last year, if this is in effect, BJ, you wouldn't have to be the one waving the flag for Coastal Carolina because the world will get – this is about the world getting – and you said it. Exposure leads to expansion. If you on the national scale to get if you're in the tournament, doesn't matter how you got there, you there. And I just think that this makes so that, it's more parity, amongst these great, elite programs. Because Kevin, you know how it is. The consolation prize, you get to play Alabama and Clemson. They ain't that good.
Yeah, but let me say this though, because I go back to that 05 example, and I'm not saying this to disagree with you, Kevin. I'm saying this so that people understand that all conference champions are not 11-1 Georgia with an incredible resume. 2005 Florida State, and I just remember this because it was the first ever ACC championship game, and I was there. We always talk about we want our teams to play their best down the stretch, and we want to have a team that's one of the best in the country. Well, from mid-October on, so the second half of the year, Florida State lost to Virginia. They then lost their last 3 games of the regular season. They lost to NC State, they lost to Clemson 35-14, and they lost to Florida 34-7. They then had a big punt return in the ACC championship game and came back and beat a very heavily favored Virginia Tech team. I'm not saying there's no justification for them being in the playoff. I'm saying I think it would be an adjustment period for people to take a Florida State team that lost its 3 final games in the regular season, lost 4 of its final 5 games, to have that team in the college football playoff fresh off of back-to-back blowouts.
Well, just because they won the ACC, I mean, that doesn't mean they're going to be seed 5. I mean, I would think
but they would be in the playoff on a 3-game losing streak.
I'm fine with that. They had their chance. Virginia Tech had their chance. Virginia Tech didn't seal the deal. Is that Florida State's fault? No, they played a game to decide it. Everybody in that stadium knew who was going to.
But are you?
They would be the 12th seed. There's no question. They would be the last team in a tournament.
Right, but this is what I'm asking. If we're saying every game matters, but Florida State lost its last 3 games of the regular season, how does every game matter?
Because they still put themselves in a position to still win the ACC. Like the whole thing about it is, BJ, I mean, when you start talking about these games, I mean, college is the only, big time, sports arena that teams go undefeated. It don't happen in basketball. It don't happen in baseball. It don't happen in the pros. Like the 2019 LSU team went undefeated. That don't mean, we understand it, but they also had an opportunity to win it, right? What if LSU was in Conference USA and they did that? Will people care? No. So where you do it matters too. I just think that BJ, Coastal Carolina, one of the best teams in the country last year, on a neutral site, not named Clemson, not named Alabama, maybe Georgia. They're going to beat a lot of teams. So this is a chance to get those guys in. And do we really care about what the final record was for the national champion? No. We care about who's playing in it. It's not, hey, man, they lost 3 games. So, I mean, Ohio State literally played 5 games and went to the Natty last year. Nobody said, well, a lot of people said something. So I just think this comes down to opportunity to me. Don't tell me you the best team in the country because you won it and I ain't even have an opportunity to make it into the tournament.
But BJ, I think you look at some of those outliers like that Florida State and you say, well, are we rewarding them? I would say, well, what about the rest of the conference who was playing meaningful games also down the stretch and they didn't step up and win? I think those are things I get it. And you say, look, the record looks bad, but we put teams in all the time. As long as we know the rules, the NCAA tournament, you win the conference basketball championship. You could be 0 for the season. You win that, you get in the NCAA tournament. Now, people may not like that, but that's the rules.
No, and Kevin, just to be clear, I'm not inherently disagreeing with that. I'm just making sure as we move forward, we understand the totality of what we're saying because I just went and double-checked. That 2005 ACC championship game, again, Florida State was average during the regular season.
Well, let me say this.
Hold on a second. Virginia Tech, after that Florida State loss, was entering that ACC championship was number 7 in the country and was 11-1. They were 11-1, but because they had a bad quarter of football, it basically okay. But what I'm asking is, I just want to make sure we would be okay with 1 game meaning more than the previous 12.
Yeah, because that's how college football has always been. Like the rules don't change because we go into a 12-team playoffs. There are teams.
Well, Ben, I don't know if that's how college football has always been. Alabama didn't play for a conference title and won the national title.
But Alabama is accepted to the rule.
But you can't change the rules midstream. And you say, well, we made one more game. Yeah, well, the game you're using is the conference championship game. Yes.
Well, I think you could, because you theoretically, in order to protect some of the regular season, say conference champions get an automatic bid if they are ranked in the top 20. But if they're 6-6 and 37th overall, maybe they don't get an automatic bid. I don't know.
The conference is real good that year. Like you can't get if the conference is real good one year, your record is going to reflect that.
That's my whole point. That year in 2005, the ACC Atlantic was not good. It was not good. Let
me just say this though, BJ. I mean, and again, this is where everybody gets all bent out of shape, and they're like, "How could you put a 7-5 Florida State team in?" If you truly believe that Florida State team was trash, are they making it out of the first round?
But that's not supposed to be the point. The point's not supposed to be you justify selection based on what happened.
Again, let's say they make it in as the 12. What happens if they win in the first round?
But again, I've always hold on.
I think you're playing by the rules.
I've always said this about the playoff, though. You don't pick playoff participants revisionistly based off what happens in the playoff, because you're hitting the reset button. As Ben has said, anything can happen in one game. You don't use what happens moving forward as a validator for what happened in terms of constructing the format. Who gets in the playoff is supposed to be a reflection of what was done during the regular season, not what could happen in the playoffs.
Yeah, but at the same time, once you get to the playoffs, it doesn't matter what your record was. You did enough to get in. Like the goal is to get in. I take it to the NCAA tournament. There are teams with the last 4 out or what may have you that was good enough to get in. If I won my conference at 6-6, the rules say the conference champion gets in. Now, once I get in and I'm playing somebody who's 12-1 and I beat them, that just meant that my record is not a reflection of how good I could play in one game. You said
I understand. I just want us to be ready for that is all I'm saying.
It happens in the NFL every single year.
Yeah, I'm fine with it personally. I mean, that's if that's the rules we want to play by, and I wish they would, I'm fine with it because every team has a chance in every conference to go out on the field and win. You don't want Florida State to be in the playoffs at 7-5, well, 11-1 Virginia Tech should have won the game. The end. I mean, again, that's all I can say from that standpoint. We got to step aside. Rich Styles is going to join us. We'll talk a little golf next here on 3 and Out. Good to have you here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, as we are joined by our next guest who joins us each Tuesday here on the show, talking golf. Good friend of the show and host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, Rich Stiles, joins us here on 3 and Out. Rich, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm traveling down I-95 on my way back to the area.
Oh, well, wait, we are glad to have you on. And again, last week we had the Memorial and just strange circumstances there on the PGA Tour where Jon Rahm plays his entire round on Saturday, comes off the course at 18, leading by 6 strokes, and the PGA Tour officials meet him and say, hey, man, you had a positive COVID test. You're going to have to withdraw. And his 18 under, when he stepped off, still would have won the tournament by 5 strokes. I mean, how strange have we seen it get in golf where a guy that's leading walks off the course, he's allowed to play his whole round. They're like, yeah, you had a positive test.
Well, it's unfortunate, believe me. For him to be that far ahead, to have shot a 64 to finish his 3rd round, and then to find out that he tested positive. The PGA Tour is pretty black and white as far as what happens if that happens, is that he immediately have to withdraw from the tournament, DQ, and like he was never there. But on the other side of the coin, John should have, and maybe he didn't know who he came in contact with that had it or have been asymptomatic, but the point of the matter is there is a bubble that the PGA Tours used to be in where they were totally protected and no one was able to get into that bubble, and now that's kind of been opened up a little bit, and maybe that's what happened to Jon Rahm, is that he was within an area of somebody who had it, and because they didn't have that bubble again, it just turned out unfortunate for him. And it is very unfortunate because he turned away an opportunity to win $1.6 million.
Yeah. And Rich, from what I understand, he was around somebody that apparently had a positive test, and he was asymptomatic and had no symptoms, no anything, and just was told he had to go quarantine and not play.
And they tested him and he became positive, and they tested him again within a 24-hour period, and he was still positive, and so that's why he had to withdraw. And now he's got to basically quarantine himself until Tuesday of the U.S. Open. And I'm pretty sure he'll probably go back and try and play in the U.S. Open next week.
Rich, the PGA Tour just up the road in Ridgeland, South Carolina with the Palmetto Championship. What do you expect this week there?
Well, a lot of the guys have played the course. They're familiar with the course. And I think when they knew that there was going to be a PGA Tour event, because Canada is closed, replacing the RBC Canadian Open at Congaree, they started going up and started to play a little bit. I talked to Harris English and Jonathan Bird, who's playing in it on a past champion exemption. And Harris said it's a great golf course, firm greens, narrow fairways. You just basically, like most of the golf courses, you got to keep it in play and have your chance, make your putts, make some birdies. And, they said it was just a great layout, and it was one that they could probably drive to prior to playing in the U.S. Open.
Hey, Rich, even getting back to the Jon Rahm situation, obviously, you look at how great of a job the PGA Tour has done throughout 2020, even now in 2021. Because of what happened to Jon Rahm, do you think more golfers are being more, not saying they are, but going to be more cautious, away from the golf course?
Well, I think he's got to be. I mean, he's got a lot at stake. I mean, especially for what happened to him last week, he would have won the tournament. And those opportunities for some of the PGA guys to have a chance to win, one or more tournaments in a year, it doesn't come very often. John is one of the top golfers, and he's an incredible competitor. And, right now, if I was him, I'd be thinking about, okay, I'm going to put myself back into a bubble, and I'm not going to get into a situation like that again for a while.
As you said, Rich, very interesting because not only because it happened, but because now because of the quarantine policy, it pushes him to U.S. Open week. As you said, the next major is coming up next week. That's obviously being able to find out if you can play or not on Tuesday before tee times on Thursday doesn't give you a lot of time to prepare.
No, it doesn't, because usually you're playing your practice rounds, maybe even if it's only 9 holes on Monday and 9 holes on Tuesday, and then maybe if there's a pro-am, you're playing in that or whatever. But you need that pre-tournament time in order to prepare to play whatever golf course you're going to play. And John Rahm has played Torrey Pines before, but he's probably not played Torrey Pines with it being fitted up for a U.S. Open. So Torrey Pines is probably not going to play like it has before in a regular PGA Tour event. The rough is going to be higher. The fairways are probably not going to be as wide. The greens are probably going to be faster. So it's just going to play a lot different, and he'll not have as much prep time as he probably would have liked to have had.
Yeah, certainly. It's going to be fun to watch, or interesting to watch, I should say, to see how that storyline plays out ahead of next week's U.S. Open. Rich, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Okay, guys. Thanks for calling.
I appreciate it. You can hear Rich Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. talking golf here on the Back Nine Boys Golf Show. We'll come back. We'll take 3 when we return all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben counting you down towards Braves and Phillies a little bit later tonight. Game 1 of a 3-game series. Aaron Nola and Drew Smiley, BJ's favorite. They're on the mound for the Braves tonight. Before we go any further, though, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out, shall we? All right, given all the recent news in the National Football League, who is the favorite to win the AFC South?
I do think it's Tennessee, Ben. I do. I know the Colts are expected to be really good, and defensively they have big time playmakers. But I think it's fair to have questions about Carson Wentz. His health, his consistency as a quarterback, and I think the pressure is going to be there. I think the Colts are good, but on paper, just given some uncertainties with Wentz, I think I would go Tennessee. And I know Tennessee needs to get better defensively, but that offense, even if Tannehill is not considered an elite quarterback, he's been really good, really proficient. And then you're talking about A.J. Brown and now Julio Jones. And, oh, by the way, Derrick Henry in the backfield, a really good offensive line. So I do think, Ben, it's your Tennessee Titans. I do.
I mean, the Tennessee Titans are obviously, going to be my pick because, number one, BJ, they've been in the playoffs the last couple of years, and then you look at the fact that there's so much inconsistency going on around them. You don't know what's going on in Houston with Deshaun Watson. Carson Wentz 2 years into his new deal, got sent packing to go to Indy. I know Trevor Lawrence, I seen something that he got hamstring tightness. I mean, even though I think he's going to be more to live up to the billing, I'm just going to go with a 2,000-yard rusher. A guy in Ryan Tannehill who's getting an addition of Julio Jones to go along with the young A.J. Brown. I think while the defense is definitely going to have to play better for Tennessee defense is never ever going to be known, for being juggernauts in the AFC South. So give me the Tennessee Titans. Mike Vrabel is doing an underappreciated job right now in Nashville.
Yeah, I mean it is the Titans, and I think everybody else has got some catching up to do. I think the Jags may be better than the Texans, but that may not be saying much given kind of the turmoil that their franchise is in right now. So, yeah, I think it's Tennessee big time. I mean, you have you probably have the 2 best wide receivers and the best running back without question in the division. It's got to be Tennessee. Moving on, take 2. Obviously, you've seen the City Connect jerseys that teams in the MLB, NBA, and others have done. If you designed a City Connect jersey for your hometown, what would be on it?
I think for Brunswick, if you could have it say the Wick, which is really cool, or Golden Isles, maybe that would be pretty cool. And I think it would be meaningful if you could have a patch, somewhere remembering Ahmaud Arbery as well.
I mean, for me, with so many cities in the state of GA with Burrow on the back, I would put the real Burrow. I would put Thorough in the Burrow. I would put Swainsboro's Finest on there, and I would make sure they understand that it's a lot of Burrows in the state of Georgia. There's only one real Burrow. No offense to States or Waynes or Green or whoever you are. It's either Swainsboro, GA, or nothing at all. Swainsboro versus the world. That's what's gonna be on our jersey.
Is there room left for a number with all that on there?
I mean, listen. At the end of the day, Kevin, you know what I'm saying? I mean, put Burrow's Finest on there. Make these other Burrows eat it. Burrow at the top, Finest at the bottom. Put that 0 in the middle, and get the hell out the way. I don't want to hear y'all nonsense.
Yeah. Boy, mine, I'm like, what would I even say? I'm kind of like in the middle there. I know Christian was like, should I just say ATL? And you're like, no, you're not really from Atlanta. So I'm OTP. I'm OTP. Maybe I could put OTP on the jerseys outside the perimeter.
Okay. I mean, Kevin, you might be on to something now, but I would differ. I mean, cats from Latonia and Marietta, they're gonna be like, we from Atlanta. I don't care what Christian Gokel said. Gwinnett.
Yeah, outside the perimeter does encompass a lot. So I mean, if I want to really get it low, I mean, I hate to do it, but they tore it down, so I'd actually be nostalgic. I could do like Gwinnett is great.
I mean, I'm just saying, man. I-85.
Yeah, nobody else but Christian has any clue what I just said, but
I don't. I mean, listen.
Okay. All right, let me just
285 connect on there. Something. I'm just saying.
All the people have no clue what I'm talking about. If you're coming up, 85?
Yep.
And you go right after you get into Gwinnett, just before you get to Jimmy Carter. There used to be 2 water towers right there off the side of 85. And on the water towers, it said Gwinnett is great. So when you're driving into Gwinnett County, you would see Gwinnett is great. They were there ever since I was a kid. And I think like 5 years ago, they tore them down. So like some condos or something could go there. But that was kind of a landmark in Gwinnett. I mean, Snellville, where everyone is someone, that's a lot to put on a jersey.
Wait. So you got Decatur where it's great, and you got Gwinnett is great. I like it. Snellville, everybody is someone. That is lame. You do not put that on anything. That is ridiculous.
But if you're not from that area, you really don't know the Gwinnett is great reference at all. I mean, just being honest.
I was gonna say just for the Atlanta folks, the actual ITP people in here, the folks with the Fulton County address, the Fulton County, the tag down there, not the folks who says Gwinnett and Forsyth and Cobb on their tags and claim to be from Atlanta. No, from my ATL homies, right? It can't be Hot Atlanta. Let's get that out of here. No one from Atlanta has ever said Hot Atlanta. All right, we can go ahead and get that out of there. The one that I think would really work for me, Kevin, is maybe just like gridlock traffic, like across the chest. Just
not going anywhere
yeah,
for a while.
Just like a bump, like cars that are like bumper to bumper, just stopped up right there. That would work for me. Or maybe just put Big Boy on there and Andre 3000.
I'm just saying. I mean, y'all got so many things y'all can do. I mean, yeah, don't limit yourself, man. I mean. There it is. Put the love below.
And honestly, more so than ATL, which the Falcons refer to it as, it's A-Town. Like, that's more so than anything. It's peace out, A-Town down. Like, it's A-Town. So maybe just like a
put
peace
on
down.
there.
Yeah.
Put Lil Jon on there. Put Luda on there.
I don't know. Lil Jon claims Atlanta, but I think he might be OTP too.
With his address, I mean, he can't afford them city limits. He's trying to get low. He can't afford them city taxes. So I understand that.
I think Lil Jon might be OTP too.
All right.
But I know because they literally bought it and turned it into a historical landmark. The house where Andre 3000 and Big Boy recorded their first albums. So like I know they're ITP. So we're good. We're good. Like I said, everybody says they're from Atlanta.
I will say I will tell this because Christian knows this is true. When you talk to people and they're like, "Where are you from?" Georgia. Where? You don't go in there and say, "Hey, I'm in Lawrenceville." Well, where the heck is that? Well, you go outside Atlanta about this 30 miles and it's this and that. No, you just say, "Look."
Atlanta, no, if somebody asks you
fine.
where you're from, say I'm from north of Atlanta.
Don't
say you're from Atlanta.
No, but
don't claim that, bro.
Here's how you distinguish a true Georgian. And if you say, "Hey, hey, where are you from?" "I'm from Atlanta," and then they follow it up with, "Where? What part?"
That's fair.
Then you say,
"I'm
from Gwinnett." "Oh, gotcha. I'm from the Buckhead side." It's fine.
No. Listen, when I was up north and somebody go, "Where you from?" and you from Atlanta, I go, "No." And people that don't live in Georgia think the whole state is Atlanta. They think the whole thing is Atlanta. Like if I'm from Swainsboro, well, where is that? Well, I mean, you know what Twin City is? Nope. It's just a waste of time. I mean, so
if they think it's all Atlanta, Ben, I'm sure they don't know where the borough where it's third.
85% of the state of Georgia, for those of you who don't know, is just pine trees. That's literally all it is. You have Atlanta. There's a little brief break in the pine trees in Macon, and then if you head down 16, there's a little break in the pine trees in Savannah. The rest is just pine trees.
We gotta breathe.
It's just woods.
It's just pine trees. You go 45 minutes north of Atlanta. Guess what?
It's woods.
Pine trees.
It's just all woods. All right, moving along. Take 3. Today is National Best Friends Day, and seeing as how best friends like to embarrass one another, Christian wants you to tell embarrassing stories about your co-hosts here on the show.
Well, I mean, this is an iconic moment. I mean, it's not only shared by us, but so many fans. And Kevin, that is when you think about sports and you think about the draft time, especially you think about the 40-yard dash. It's such a fixture in our minds, right? And we think about times. Okay, you run a 4.5, or well, first off, everybody thinks they run a 4.5. Like everybody thinks they're in the 4.5 to 4.6 range, and that is not real life. But Kevin ran not only an effective 35-yard dash, he ran a 35-yard dash in total. He did not finish and get to the 40 yards, and that became very popular watching that. But first off, a couple of things to revisit your run. And I know you had the run for redemption, Kevin. But first off, shout out to you for doing it, because we were at a football camp and everybody's going, who wants to run the 40? Like talking to, and we're looking around. I'm not doing it because I know it's not going to go well. I haven't stretched in, years. And you said, hey, I'll run, I'll do it. And you didn't have, it's not like you had an hour to get ready. You just said, okay, film it, I'll run it. And you got.
No, I don't remember saying film it, I'll run it. I remember somebody saying, do y'all want to run it? I was like, yes, I will run it for time. And everybody else decided to film it.
And your feet got going a little too fast, and you fell down. 35 yards.
It was not because I was too fast. I will say that.
Trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but that's one of my favorite memories is you at the football camp running the 40, running the 35.
Oh my God. At BJ's parents' house. This was a classic. BJ's going out to get ready to go get the kids some food. Chicken nuggets is always on the menu. Kids love chicken nuggets. It's a beautiful thing. And Mama B say, "Hey BJ, bring me back some chicken nuggets." So BJ goes, "All right, cool. I'm going to get chicken nuggets. I'm gonna bring you some back." Well, BJ brings his mom back when he brought the kids, and she quote got in his face. And I'm not gonna name the franchises, but she told him, I only eat chicken nuggets from here. And BJ's response was, I don't know what the hell you eat. Because I'm just saying, what you mean I only eat this? You had to see it though, Kevin. She got up in his face like, what? And then she says, what you got for your children are for children. Like, I eat grown people chicken nuggets, like up the upper echelon of chicken nuggets. Here's another thing too. This is what I realized about BJ. Hey, when you ride in the car with BJ a long way, he thinks he's gonna give you, I don't know, the history of music. Like, hey, dude, you need to be cultured. Which means I said, and you listen, and you've seen Rush Hour. You don't ever touch a black man's radio. He didn't get the memo. Then BJ doesn't like to sleep in hotels. Like he rather just, So we go into the Cure Bowl, and Kevin, I am tired. I am seeing double and triple. BJ goes, we're fine. Let me tell you something. BJ better be lucky he needed Wi-Fi, because it was going to be one for the money. Because we wasn't going to be on this show no more. I'm struggling. This is when I was struggling, Kevin. I got the window down with the AC on. That means I am tired. Here go BJ, just tapping away like, I got to post it. I said, no, you need to drive. You want me to drive, dude? That's absurd. So, Mama getting up in his face, BJ having no empathy for you. I don't care if you in Charlotte. We could have been in Louisiana watching LSU. He wants to drive back home after the game because he works in the wee hours of the night. But hey, it's BJ, Mr. Absurd himself. And Kevin, I'm just saying, Kevin, the time that you went up in a certain store and the guy thought you was following him.
That's really not an embarrassing story, but yeah, a guy wanted to fight me because he thought I was following him in the store. I'm like,
why are you
trying to get paper? Like, I'm not following you. I did have someone say that I had a serial killer's name one time, and I was like, appreciate that. I was like, I am still the paying customer, right? And they're like, yeah.
Whoa. You had a restaurant in town? You got
No, I was at it. We were at a gas station getting gas. So you go inside. I was getting something to drink. And when I checked out, the girl behind the counter, we were like talking, and she was like asking everybody what their name was. And I told her, she goes, "Isn't that a serial killer's name?" And I was like, "Excuse me." I didn't know serial killers had a handbook on what names I could use.
There was a certain producer who's listening right now who had a little mishap with a milkshake one time, and it got a little rough. So, and listen, shout out to producer Jim. It's too many things to name, but the fact that
planning while running, I think Jim did that trying to race an intern.
Yeah,
hey, we're up against it. That's take 3. We'll come back. It's 3 and Out. Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Oh, great to be here on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben counting you down towards Braves and Phillies. We'll get to that coming up in the final hour of the program. And just a big night in Philadelphia in general with the Hawks. Game 2 against the 76ers. Braves starting a 3-gamer against the Phillies tonight. So we'll look at that. Also now post Julio Jones. Whose turn is it to step up there for the Atlanta Falcons? You know, obviously Arthur Smith saying, look, I don't worry about players that never coached. We're talking about Julio Jones. Well, who is he worrying about when it comes time to make those decisions? We'll get to that coming up in the final hour.
I just think that I respect Arthur Smith for keeping it 100, BJ and Kevin, because the whole thing about Kevin, you know what he's really saying is, don't ask me about Julio no more. I want to keep him, but we ain't got no freaking money.
Those questions are going to be there all preseason.
That would be a quote. Don't ask me about Julio. We got no freaking money. Come on. The end. Hour 3 coming up next. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back. Hour 3 of 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Counting you up towards Braves and Phillies tonight. The first of a 3-game series. Drew Smyly against Aaron Nola, and a big showdown in Philly tonight. Just right down the street from one another, BJ and Ben. You have the Braves and the Phillies, and you have the Hawks and the 76ers in game 2 of that series. I know a lot of trains of thought, BJ and Ben, about how the Hawks approach this one, how the 76ers approach this one, trying not to go down 0-2. But any chance the Hawks don't get beat tonight or don't get just run out of the building with a little retribution from the 76ers?
Well, I think Atlanta should be playing with a lot of confidence. Clearly they are. Not only did they win game 1 in Philly, but they, had a 20-point lead for a fair portion of that game. This is a team that's playing with great energy and cohesion. But I do think, Ben, you're going to get a desperate Philadelphia team. And maybe that means they're inefficient. Maybe that means they're out of sync. But the first quarter, the first, couple of minutes of the game, I think it's going to be important that Atlanta understands, and I'm sure they do, that the 76ers are coming with everything they got, because this is a team, if they get down 2-0 going back to the ATL, that is a tough spot to be in. So I think you're going to get obviously a very talented team in Philadelphia, but I think they're going to play with desperation and a lot of energy tonight because they know they have to have it. All of the pressure's on the 76ers.
Yeah, but BJ, that's why it still plays in the favor of, of the Hawks. As we mentioned, the Hawks weren't even supposed to get out of the first round, right? It's supposed to be 2-story franchise, the Knickerbockers versus the 76ers. You were supposed to have, Derrick Rose resurrecting his career, going up against Joel Embiid, a MVP candidate, Ben Simmons, still one of the more talented players in the NBA. But BJ, have we even seen the Hawks play their best game yet? The Hawks are doing what they do. Like, what get exposed in the playoffs and what's get overlooked in the regular season, right? Because you got so many games. Well, the thing about the Philadelphia 76ers, if Joel Embiid ain't running their offense through him, they're not that good of an offense. If Ben Simmons, if you can force him into bad shots, if you can force him into shooting, period, that's not what he does. And the thing about Atlanta, they play through Trey every game. Their role players, Clint Capella and those guys, they're doing a great job. Collins and those guys doing a great job every single game. Lou Williams and those guys provide veteran leadership. I just think that we need to talk more about what Atlanta is doing and not just feel that, because when people say coming out with desperation, you still got to go out there, still 5-on-5. Who's going to guard Trey? Because Ben Simmons is an All-NBA, I think first-team All-NBA. Did you see him first game? Me neither, when he had to go out there and guard Trey. So I still think you playing. If they do win game 2, it would be because they lost game 2 in the first series, and you saw what happened with that series. I don't think Trae Young and this young Hawks team are nervous at all when it comes to these Philadelphia 76ers, who, to me, still got a long way to go in this process.
Well, you might be talking about one of the more improbable runs in sports, right, BJ? From the time that Nate McMillan took over, this was a team that was kind of dead in the water, right? I think people were talking about the 8th seed as, well, maybe they can get there, right? It's like one of those, the way they were playing, they were a losing team. Maybe in the second half, they could get there. And not only did they get there, they got to the 5th seed. They are into the second round. A lot of people, I heard Stephen A. Smith on First Take today say, if the Hawks win tonight, they will be in the Eastern Conference Finals because they're up 2-0 going back to Atlanta. From a team that was losing and changed coaches midstream to a potential conference finals, that just doesn't happen. You don't change coaches in midseason if you think you have a conference finals caliber team, right? And they did, because they were vastly underachieving and potentially could go there. Obviously, a lot of work to get there, but I think you go out and play tonight with reckless abandon and try to get this one as best you can, because 2-0 statistically puts you in a much better spot of moving on, knowing you're still going home with home court advantage at that point.
Oh, an amazing turnaround. An absolutely amazing turnaround. I'm looking at the regular season schedule. You go back to early February, and it was a difficult stretch of the schedule. You had LA, Dallas, Utah, Indiana, up at New York, but you lost 7 of 8. You lost 7 of 8 games to start out the month of February. And now you look at a team that has lost once, right? In the entire playoffs, the Hawks have lost once. And that was a game that got away from them a little bit late. They still held a lead for a good portion of that. I believe it was game 2 against New York. So they've been one of the best, most complete teams in the playoff. That is not an overreaction to say. They have been one of the best, most complete, most successful teams in the playoffs so far.
The Hawks were 14-20 14-20, and with a series win, could be in the Eastern Conference Finals.
They've been very, very impressive because, like I said, I mean, I'm not taking nothing away from Milwaukee and Brooklyn. I'm not taking nothing away from from the West. I just think that when you look at this Hawks team, everybody embraces their role. From Trey, to Clint Capella, to Collins, to Bogdanovic. I mean, everybody embraces their role. That is hard to do when you talk about NBA because somebody wants to be that lead dog when you got Trey. But then everybody seems to play off him very well. As long as they don't start jacking up threes, like they did in game 2, they're going to be hard to beat BJ and Kevin because Atlanta plays their game. Most teams lose because you get them out of their game. You want to go up and down with them, they got fresh legs. You want to try to play bully ball? That didn't work either with the Knickerbockers. I think with the Philadelphia 76ers team, they're being exposed for what they lack, and I think Atlanta, is showing what they don't lack. And that's confidence on the basketball court is very, very dangerous because Trey got range like Steph. He don't shoot like Steph, but he has range, and he has the green light. He gonna have the ball in his, him getting that first win at the guard, that floater, that's all the confidence he needed. So I like this. I like this young Hawks team. Give Nate McMillan a lot of credit. He was able to, do what Lloyd Pierce just wasn't able to do as far as like developing these guys. And Kevin, just like I know, I keep on saying this: the people that have the most fun are the part of the people that weren't supposed to be there. They got the last tickets. How many more tickets? We got 12 more tickets left. These Hawks guys coming in here. Man, and then, the Knickerbockers, they on stage performing. Oh, there go R.J. Barrett, there go, Derrick Rose, there go Tom Thibodeau. Well, they turned the lights out. Now you got to deal with Joel Embiid and Simmons and company. I'm telling you, BJ, people keep on looking bad at Trey, because they got everything to say, but his game, the young man can hoop regardless of his defensive inabilities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, is this one of those things from a defensive standpoint? Because we were talking about the, kind of the 76ers offense yesterday and how for the first 3 quarters they were okay. And then in the fourth quarter, they were really good. I think scored over 40 points in the fourth quarter. Is this something, and I've heard you say this sometimes, Kevin, before, where maybe you just don't really overly try to focus on stopping Embiid because he's going to get his, and you basically say, hey, if Embiid gets 35, that is what it is. But this is not necessarily a great 3-point shooting team with Philadelphia. We're going to try to limit the production from the guys on the perimeter and try to be effective defensively that way, not trying to do whatever it takes and commit your whole team to stopping Embiid.
Yeah, I don't think you waste a lot of time and energy trying to stop him when you could stop everybody else and have a better chance of winning, quite frankly. And again, so what if he goes off and has 45? I mean, the Hawks scored 126 in the first game. That's a lot more than 45. So, I mean, I think you're going to have other guys step up for Philadelphia. And if you can try to neutralize them, I think that's the way I would go about it. And just let Joel Embiid not just do whatever he wants, but not try to overcommit to try to slow him down. And again, in Philadelphia tonight, you got the Braves and the Phillies 3-game series. Very important because it's divisional series, BJ. You're a half a game up on the Phillies heading into tonight. But tonight's pitching matchup, not necessarily a favorable one for you. You've got Drew Smyly against Aaron Nola. On paper, yikes, that one doesn't look too good.
And I think Drew Smyly is probably pitching for his future in terms of being an every 5th day starter. It's a guy who has an ERA up near 6, and that's not good. I mean, just being honest, that is well below average, especially for a contending team. And Nola's a good pitcher. I mean, I think he's had a lot of success against the Braves, but I don't really think this game tonight is so much about Nola versus the Braves offense. I think it's about Smyly against Philadelphia's offense because the Phillies have a lot of power in that lineup all the way through, Harper and others. And Smiley's given up the second most home runs in all of baseball and has done so in fewer innings than just about anybody. So he has got to keep the ball down. He's got to locate. You cannot fill the bases up with walks and even singles, because when you give up a lot of home runs, I think we've seen this. If you give up 2 or 3 solo home runs, that's not ideal, but you can absorb that and still win. You give up 2 or 3 home runs with runners on, and all of a sudden it's, you're out in the 3rd inning, Josh Tomlin's in, and it's 7-1 before you settle in. So I think you've got to limit to say the big play, you've got to limit the home runs. You've got to limit those. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Smyly, not only for tonight, but tonight as it pertains to his role the rest of the season.
And you hope so. You hope he thrive off that pressure. I mean, the one thing Smiley gonna, hopefully understands outside of that Philadelphia lineup, that Phillies lineup, BJ, is he got to give confidence for that bullpen. Give them something to work towards once they do go to that bullpen. And look, this NL East, we know how tight it was going to be. We knew how tough it was going to be, and it's living up to the billing. And Kevin, it's already like this, pre All-Star game. I mean, it's going to be obviously a fight to the finish post All-Star game, but. I mean, what? You get Kershaw, you get Bauer, now you get, Aaron Nola. It's not going to get any easier. I mean, the only person they haven't got is DeGrom, and you couldn't even tell when they played the freaking Mets. Go out there and do your job. Give the bullpen something to go out there and hopefully work towards. And let's stick with these winning ways. And I'm sorry, if you can beat the Dodgers, you can beat the Phillies. I know I can say that sitting here, but I'm just saying it's got to give you confidence with what you just did in that LA series.
Well, yeah, and again, BJ, I'm interested to see Shane Green tonight, if he gets a chance to pitch. I think he got called up on Sunday or Saturday and did not pitch as a late Sunday did not pitch in that series finale against the Dodgers. So I'm interested to see how Brian Snitker uses him and how that changes the dynamic, because what was the thing said about the Braves last year? You had 4 guys with closing experience, right? You had AJ Minter, actually had more than that, but I mean, in terms of long-term closing experience, you had Mark Melancon, you had Drew Smiley, you had Will Smith, you had Shane Green. You had 3 guys with a lot of closing experience, and that shortened the game. Hey, we get through the 7th inning, we can turn it over to those guys, and in combination, we essentially have 3 guys to come in and shut the game down. I'm very interested to see now that Green is back in the fold, how that affects a Will Smith. Can you 1-2 a team with Green and Will Smith in the final couple of innings and shorten the game that way? Very excited to see if there's kind of a newfound confidence in that bullpen, given the new role some of them are likely to have.
And it's a good time to welcome Shane Green because this is a big series. Make no mistake about it. I know a lot of the focus in recent days was on the weekend with LA, and understandably so. But I believe you have a half-game lead, Kevin. Is that right, over Philadelphia for second place in the division? You're still 3.5 behind the Mets. So if this series goes poorly, not only could you find yourself in third place in the division, but you're probably, given that the Mets, I believe, are playing the Baltimore Orioles, you're probably going to be, 4.5, 5.5 games out of first if it goes poorly. Whereas if it goes well, you put some distance between yourself and the third place team, but maybe you can gain a game on the Mets potentially. So this is a huge series, a really big start tonight for Drew Smiley. And I'm with you. I think just having Shane Green there should kind of positively impact the confidence of everybody in the bullpen. But I'm going to say what I say every night when we talk about the Braves. It's going to start on the mound with the starter, Kevin.
And we'll see what happens there in Philly tonight. Hawks and Braves not separated by much real estate tonight, both up there in the city of brotherly love. We'll come back. We're talking Falcons football. Who's ready to fill the shoes of Julio Jones now that he's gone? And whose turn is it to step up? We'll break that down next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you. Of course, Julio Jones gone to the Titans. Interesting gesture. Apparently, A.J. Brown was willing to give him number 11, and Julio Jones was like, nope, that's your number. You keep it. And so kind of a gesture there from Julio Jones. But with that void, and again, Arthur Smith says, look, I don't worry about players I never coach. Well, let's worry about the players he is going to coach. Who's ready to step up and be that next guy? Is Calvin Ridley ready to be the number one? As Ben has talked this week, Roddy White was number one. You brought in Julio and kind of groomed him to take over. Has Calvin Ridley been successfully groomed to take over as the number one at this point?
I believe he has, and I believe that the thing about it is every single year in the National Football League is no different than every single year in college football. They are either recruiting or drafting your replacement every single year. Julio just lasted over a decade. Really is a guy that learned from Julio, and I think that is he the size of Julio? No. Can he run routes like I've never seen? Yes, the guy is ready for the big time, and the reason why Calvin really got to be ready for two things. One, he got to be ready to be the number one, and he got to be ready to groom Justin Gage and those guys. He got to be ready, BJ, because this notion of replacing somebody. Can you potentially give me Julio numbers? Maybe. Can you give me Julio impact? No, because every time Julio is out there, look at what the defense does. The defense doesn't move when Ridley is out there. Everybody moves when Julio is. Guys are shifting over. That you see, whenever you see a cornerback before a play, look back. He's telling that safety, "You better give me some help," because it's going to be. But obviously, the easy name is Kyle Pitts, right? I do think Kyle Pitts is going to have to be able to help with that production in the red zone, in the money zone, on third down to move the chains. But when you ask me who's ready, is Calvin really ready to step up in Julio's absence? Yes. Is Calvin really ready to give you Julio number? No.
But Ben, are you asking a lot for Kyle Pitts to step in as a rookie and be like target number one for Matt Ryan? I mean, that's to me putting a lot of pressure on a kid who's stepping in the league to be target number one. When I think Calvin Ridley, as you said, is he as big as Julio? No, but can he make play? I think he can. I think his speed is certainly something that's going to make him a big time X factor now that he is the guy that everybody's focusing on.
No, I will say just because I really had Julio Jones on the other side doesn't mean he was going to be successful. He just became successful because he understood that I know I was going to be Robin to Batman over there, but I could still play a star role. Kyle Pitts, on the other hand, they're going to use him for what he's built for. 6'6", 245, 250, 4.4 speed. They're going to use him what he's for. Everybody on defense knows he's a high. You're not going to be the highest drafted tight end in NFL history to not produce or even be given every opportunity to fail. Because the best players are given more opportunities to fail than other guys. But Kyle Pitts is built for it. Matty Ice is going to demand every single ounce of energy and talent out of him, and that's bad for the competition. Because I am not comparing the SEC to no NFL. I don't care. Alabama is not the 33rd team in the NFL. The SEC is the best conference in college. That's all it is. It is college. Kyle Pitts is going to be asked to get in that zone. So I just think that for me, really going to have to make sure he's going to engage, and Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts is going to have to be a two-man tandem that's going to be hard to stop. And if you can do that, we still going to talk about Julio. But hopefully he'll become more and more of a memory, as the season goes on, BJ, because there are certain people, you ain't replacing no Julio Jones. I mean, let's get out of here with that. Julio Jones is already a Hall of Famer, and he's 32 years old, and he's still considered a top 5 receiver. You ain't replacing that. Calvin Ridley may never be a top 5 receiver, but he can still be a number one, true number one.
Yeah, there is no replacing Julio Jones, and I think that needs to be understood as we move forward here. And that's not a fair expectation for fans or anybody to put on Calvin Ridley to say, hey, you have to be Julio Jones, who is arguably one of the 10 or 15 best receivers in the history of the league potentially. When you talk about his impact, so. I think Calvin Ridley, though, is ready to be a number one, and the numbers reflect that. I mentioned this earlier in the show, Ben. He tied for 5th in the league last year with 1,374 yards. That's the same number of yards as Davante Adams. And actually, if you go by yards per game, he was 4th. He was only behind Stephon Diggs, I believe, Travis Kelce, obviously one other. I'll look it up and check, but only a couple of guys and only 2 wide receivers were ahead of him in terms of yards per game. You're over 90 yards per game. That is absolutely elite consistency. Now, do I think he and Pitts potentially can be kind of hybrid co-number ones? Yes, I do think what you asked Kevin, Kevin, I do think Pitts, there will be stretches where he's the focal point offensively because he's such a matchup problem. And how do you defend him? And he's going to find favorable coverages down the seam in the middle of the field. But yes, Calvin Ridley, I think sometimes just because you're on an offense with Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, and when you talk about the Falcons, you're talking about the defense or the offensive line, you kind of forget how productive he was last year, almost 1,400 yards. I mean, he was balling and had, I think, 8 or 9 touchdowns, and maybe that number needs to go up some if you're going to be a true number one. But I think his production was really impressive a year ago.
No, really is that dude. I'm not. And BJ, when you start saying things like the only guys that had better numbers than him is Devonta Smith and Stephon Diggs, I think those are your first team all pros at receiver. So he has that ability. And the reason why ability is one thing, accountability is another thing. The thing that Matty Ice is going to demand is accountability. He's not, because I keep on saying this, Roddy White became Roddy White after Matty Ice, not with Michael Vick. People forget that. Roddy White became Roddy. When it was Roddy White and Michael Jenkins, it wasn't much to talk about. It just really wasn't. Once Matty Ice got there, he demanded that Roddy White become the player he became. Then Julio came, and Roddy White took his game to another level because I go my game and mentor. So that's what really is going to have to be this year. I mean, being a number one receiver in the National Football League is not fair. You got 2 guys on every play. You got the safety in the corner to your side every single time. So I do think that Kyle Pitts is built for this. He's going to a team that has a top 10 quarterback that understands spacing, that understands how to help him get open. Because it's one thing to get up, it's another thing for your quarterback to throw you open. He has the longest wingspan in tight end history. I thought my arms were long. Young man got me by a little bit. It's all good, though. I just think that if it wasn't Julio Jones, it wouldn't be much to talk about, right, BJ and Kevin? But it was Julio. And you just going to have to get used to not seeing number 11 out there or whatever number he's going to wear in Tennessee. And those guys will be ready because, like I said, we just talking about the usual suspects. Matty, you got Cordell Patterson. I know they're going to use him at running back some, BJ, man, but he's a big body receiver that can hopefully provide some quality snaps for you on offense as well.
Well, and just for clarification, the only receivers with more yards per game last year were Diggs, Davante Adams, and Kelce. So you're talking about elite playmakers. And I think sometimes you can tell a lot about a player by the statistical company they keep, so to speak. And those are elite players right there. You go and look at touchdown catches a year ago. Calvin Ridley was tied for 10th in the NFL with 9 touchdown catches. That's the same number as Darren Waller and Juju Smith-Schuster. You look at his average yards per catch. He was at over 15 yards per catch, right alongside A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. So, I mean, you look at the statistical production, this guy did it last year. Now, he wasn't always facing the number one corner of the opposing team. And to your point, Ben, he wasn't always facing double teams. He was sometimes because there were times where Julio wasn't out there. But I think if you're Ridley, you've been exceptional to date. I think the transition might be preparing to get that number one corner week in and week out, that double coverage week in and week out. But he absolutely has had the production of a number one receiver.
He'll be fine. I mean, I'm not worried about Ridley. Ridley understands the nuances of the game. He understands the game within the game. He learned. If you cannot translate what Julio Jones has given you for the last 3 years in the production, you have wasted your time. You have wasted your potential. And dare I say, man, you have wasted your opportunity to go out there and potentially make a lot of money as a number one. But I think he's built for it. I think really would have got drafted at Atlanta had they had Julio or not. They just happened to have Julio. And because and once again, that makes it not easier to move on Julio, but it makes it an easier decision when you got a guy that's giving you that much proven production. They'll be fine because not because they got Kyle Pitts, not because they got Ridley, it's because they got Matty Ice. He's gonna make sure those guys find a way to get it done.
I was going to say you can make the case when Julio was with Atlanta, that was him and Ridley and some of those guys. They maybe had the best wide receiver core in the National Football League. Obviously, maybe it sounds like you guys are saying not so much who's number one, but who's going to play off of Calvin Ridley. Maybe it is going back to kind of those Tony Gonzalez days where you have a number one and your number two is the tight end, and maybe that takes some off of Gage and some of those guys that are going to be stepping into bigger roles themselves. But is there a number two at the wide receiver spot for Atlanta that can fill Calvin Ridley's shoes to play off the number one?
Well, this is an interesting question, and Ben, you obviously have a great perspective on this, but I kind of think in some ways, and I do think Russell Gage is very productive and very good. He's going to be a big-time part of the offense moving forward, but you've seen the tight end position and the receiver position kind of merge together in some respects, and I know we were talking a couple of weeks ago about the Falcons' third tight end who is a pure blocker, and you still have guys like that, and there's value in that. But when you look at the leading receivers in the NFL last year, I mean, you're seeing guys like Travis Kelce. You're seeing guys like Darren Waller, who's, I believe was a wide receiver at Georgia Tech and is a tight end matchup problem in the league. You're seeing guys like George Kittle, obviously. And I think Kyle Pitts is going to be that player. I mean, it's crazy to think about, but let's not forget, he won the Mackey last season, which, Ben, you were finalists for, goes to the best tight end in the country, and he was one of 4 finalists for the Biletnikoff Award, which goes to the best wide receiver in college football. So I think it's okay to kind of view Kyle Pitts as a hybrid receiver tight end, and I think his production will reflect that. So I understand your question, Kevin. I do about, Russell Gage, but I don't know that for me, I kind of categorize it like here's the receivers, here's the tight ends, because I think especially with players like Pitts and probably to a certain extent Hayden Hurst, they're kind of becoming one and the same, if that makes sense.
I mean, I've heard so many names when it comes to Kyle Pitts. I've heard unicorn. I've heard weapon. I've heard hybrid. I'm going to call him what he is. He's a problem. Kyle Pitts is a problem. Because the thing about it is I look at tight ends being better than another tight end when there's something one guy that can do the other guy can't. There's nothing Kyle Pitts can't do receiving the football. There's nothing he can't do. Nothing. Now, he's going to be going up against the best cover corners and slot corners and players in the world. So it's one thing when you are the best athlete on the field. It's another thing when you are just an athlete on the field. Because I'm saying, as much as I love Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Zach Ertz, Darren Waller might be the best of them all. If you look at where he's doing it and how he's doing it for the team he's doing it on, he might be better than all of them. He got Derek Carr. In the first 7 years of the NFL, the 2 guys who got the most losses in their first 7 years is David Carr and Derek Carr. I'm just saying, I'm just giving you the numbers. I'm just saying, BJ, if Darren Waller played for Kansas City, you don't think he'll put up Travis Kelce numbers? Because he's right there right now. So I look at a guy like Kyle Pitts in that breed of a tight end, more like a Darren Waller, being able to have no flaws. But once again, he got Matty Ice. So if he ain't getting it done, it won't be because they ain't trying to give him the rock.
The Falcons in mandatory mini camp going on this week as well. We'll come back. We'll lead you up towards Braves and Phillies. We'll take a look at what the potential college football playoff could look like if one of the proposals that has a lot of oomph behind it would have been passed in 2020. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to have you here on this Tuesday, Kevin, BJ, and Ben. If you missed the news earlier in the show, Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports saying sources around the College Football Playoff Committee have indicated that a 12-team model is the early favorite to emerge as the next version of the College Football Playoff, and a subcommittee will present proposals next week to the College Football Playoff Committee on various formats, and 8, 12, so on and so forth. But apparently 12 is the one that has a lot of people in the room most interested. And again, I'm not saying it will pass, but if you're going to get behind one, the 12-team expansion appears to be the one that has most people excited. And again, you look at what it could have been from last season, were this in place. Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, BJ and Ben would have been your 4 seeds and had buys. And then you would have filled it out with Florida, Iowa State. Well, no, excuse me. Florida, probably Southern Cal, Oklahoma, Indiana, Texas A&M, Coastal Carolina, Georgia, and Cincinnati for your 12-team playoff. If you're watching on our Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube feed right now, you can see we put a mock playoff bracket up there of what it would have looked like. The one shown is with the top 12 teams as they finished last year, but obviously with the Power 5 conference champions getting auto bids, Southern Cal would take a spot. The top G5 team would also get a auto bid, and then 6 at large.
I think one of the top things that stands out to me about this proposal is the inclusion of the G5, the group of 5 teams. And we've talked about this at length, and understandably so, but I can't think of a parallel in college sports where you are a part of a classification, right? Like teams in the Sun Belt, Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, Boise State, they are Division I FBS programs. They absolutely are by every measure, but they have literally no chance as currently constituted to compete for a championship. And you can say what you want about college basketball, but with the NCAA tournament, you have a chance mathematically, even if it's unlikely, you have a chance if you are affiliated in the Division I landscape to compete for the championship. And I'm not sitting here saying, I don't think any of us have ever said that, you shouldn't take strength of schedule into account, that a team like a Florida or a Georgia probably plays a tougher schedule year in and year out than a Coastal Carolina or a Cincinnati. I think that would be reflected in at-large bids. I think that would be reflected in seeding. But to sit here as currently constituted and say, hey, Cincinnati, hey, Central Florida, hey, Coastal Carolina, hey, Boise State, hey, Georgia Southern, you can go undefeated. But even if you go undefeated, you're not going to get anywhere near our postseason tournament that determines a championship. That's crazy. That's crazy. So as we move forward with this, there has to be some sort of inclusion for the group of 5, some pathway in. And that doesn't mean you have 7 or 8 or even 3 or 4 group of 5 teams in the playoff every year, but there has to be some sort of an inclusion, and I'm glad to see that be a featured part of this moving forward.
Yeah, well, BJ, and the thing is, when you talk about the group of 5, I mean, they waving the flag for an type of, not just a conference, but a lot of schools, that represent a lot of different entities. But if you're Vanderbilt, you just in the SEC. You're not, you're one of those teams, you're not going to get a chance to sniff it as well. But Kevin, I mean, like I said, you would always ask, are we expanding it? He was like, this dude asks me every year. So he was thinking, you were thinking 6 or 8 to go from 4 to 12. I can live with this because I just think that it's more of an inclusive type way of making sure more teams get not a chance to necessarily win the national championship, but to know that their games and their schedules and who they play actually do mean something.
Here's the thing I think is interesting, because you talk about having a chance in getting in there. And I know BJ went back to, what if a such and such team wins? I mean, I think if I'm sitting there as an Arkansas or a Vanderbilt or a Kentucky, I mean, if this is what we're looking at, I should be a little more excited, because now the goal is win the East, go to the SEC championship game, and I got a chance to be in the playoff. Whereas now, if you win the East and everybody's like, oh, Kentucky's won the East, and now they're going, like, you probably would get put out because of your reputation rather than what you potentially did on the field. Now I think you give a lot of teams opportunities to say, look, so if I win the conference, I can get in and have a chance of this thing. To me, it sets the goals in a completely different scenario than it's 12-0, 11-1, or our season is a failure. No, win the conference, you got a chance to get in. We're out of time. We could talk about this for forever, and I believe we're probably going to talk about it more as we come out. We'll get proposals out next week in front of the College Football Playoff Committee, and I'm excited to see what it is. I'm surprised that the one with most steam is going from 4 to 12 and not 4 to 8. Just a great expansion, as you will. But we'll talk more about that as we move forward. Appreciate Rich Stiles joining us here on 3 and Out. Braves and Phillies coming up next. Drew Smiley, Aaron Nola. Braves trying to keep it going after a series win over the Dodgers. We'll see you tomorrow. Wednesday edition of 3 and Out. If you missed any portion of the show, ESPNCoastal.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our YouTube page as well. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio.